the quote that came pretty popular when CrossFit came kind of like popular is stronger than my excuses. And nowadays I kind of see that as stronger than my feelings. So it's like I am so strong that I can overwrite everything that my body is trying to tell me, until one day you just cannot do that anymore. Like many people stumble on like not actually, like they have a whole lot of tools and a lot of information, but they haven't ever brought those into practice. But that's where the magic happens. Is like you need to actually, like, you have that bit of information, like how the diaphragm and the pelvic floor works, but it's like that information alone isn't going to help anybody. Like you actually need to figure out how you're going to help a person with that information. And I think like we try and like kind of like learn our way into being better when like the doing itself is what makes us better.
Welcome to the Empowered Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Katie St. Clair, and I'm so grateful you are joining me. On each episode, I'll be chatting with movement-related experts and guests who have a passion for looking deeper into how we can enhance our human experience with movement, breath, and better understanding of the brain and body. Let's dive right in. In today's episode, I speak with Ansku Kangas, a health, mobility, and recovery coach specializing in helping people restore balance in their life and training after a burnout or traumatic life events. Ansku shares her own history of burnout and how it led her to re-examine her priorities for her own health and ultimately what she prioritizes for her clients. We dive into how she identifies physiological needs of a client by asking better questions. We talk about the process of learning and absorbing information and how to get out of the overthinking and overconsumption mindset. I hope you enjoy this thoughtful and informative chat with Ansku. Welcome everybody back to the Empowered Performance Podcast. I am so excited to finally get to meet this person on Zoom, of course, but it feels like in real life because I've followed her on Instagram for a really long time and I just love her content. So Anna Marie is here and her nickname, Ansku, so I'm going to try to pronounce it correctly. And she is someone that I think has a viewpoint of movement that is extremely well-rounded and honest and truthful and vulnerable and all the things that I think make movement beautiful myself. And I can't wait to have her share a little bit of that with you guys today. So Ansku, can you tell everybody where you're at? Because it's always beautiful. If you go look at her Instagram, you're going to be like, wow, where's this woman? And kind of how you came to be in the industry and a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So hi everyone, and thanks for introducing me, Katie. So first of all, like I'm in Finland. This is my beautiful view for a couple more weeks, and then it gets too cold to be in here. So a little bit about me. I'm a coach. I help people with mobility, breathing issues, mainly. So I've been in this industry for around 13 years. I started as a PT, and then we built our own gym business, and now I'm mainly working as a solo coach, working with people mainly online.
So you have an in-person space in Finland?
I did, yeah. So that's kind of like part of like what I have done previously.
So are you in person at all anymore, or are you mostly online?
Mostly online at the moment, yeah.
Okay.
So it is a long story. Probably we're going to kind of like dig into the reasons why and why am I spending time in this on this island nowadays a lot. So
okay, so wait, you just opened up a can of worms, so now I'm gonna have to know. I know that I read that you had a space for like 7 years, right? An actual in-person space.
Yeah, so then I guess kind of like the not that uncommon story, like COVID happened. It wasn't the best time of my life. There was a lot of kind of like gym closures and all of that. So very, very long story. But in some ways, like I'm like not kind of like happy about all of that happened. But in some ways, like I learned more about kind of like the previous 3 years about kind of like human physiology than I ever have from any course. So that is kind of like a big reason why what led me here. So yeah, I don't know if I answered to your question. I'm going around in circles.
Okay, so it sounds like your take now that really encompasses mind, body, and the physiology aspect of things and how movement really can influence that has been greatly influenced since COVID happened and the 3 years, prior to today. But before that, what were you mainly focused on? What was your movement lens at that point? Because that's a pretty big, like, I know what it's like to have that shift. What was it that catapulted you to be like, okay, I gotta make this a priority?
Yeah, well, like I guess you could call it a burnout.
Okay.
So I was like mainly focusing on training side of things. And then just like through my own experiences that like it is still important. It's like I don't want to have anybody thinking that I don't think that training is important, but it's like it needs to be built upon a healthy base. And through kind of like the past 3 years, I understood that myself, even as a fitness professional, I wasn't truly kind of like building that up upon a healthy base. I was using exercise for to actually kind of like fill up some gaps that I needed to kind of figure out in other ways. And that's why I do what I do, because I don't like exercise can be a wonderful thing, and there are a lot of people who should be just exercising more and finding the joy of that. But then there is the whole kind of like other end, which is using exercise as a way to sort of like try and maybe manage their stress, and doing that a little bit too much,
Yeah.
and actually creating more problems through training than creating the health benefits that we still think we are. But we're actually just kind of putting too much load on a system that is already overloaded. And then that is kind of like, then we can sort of like take away the health aspect from the training. And then we are just simply training without the health benefits that should be actually like coming along from that.
So I imagine, because there's going to be a lot of trainers and therapists, people in the movement space that are actually professionals that are going to listen to this. I think that more often than not, most people that are in this industry as professionals have experienced that, because we get into it because we connect to the idea that yes, this is healthy, but it's also a way of like managing ourselves. And
Yeah.
I know for me, even from a very young age, I had some early childhood trauma, and gymnastics going 6 days a week, for 3 hours a day became a management of my mental state that eventually, right, when you're going to stop or at some point left my body kind of a wreck. And then
Yeah.
that, continues on as you continue to use exercise to kind of fuel that fire. But exercise is healthy. I'm doing air quotes, you know what I mean? So it's easy to like
Yeah.
see it as like, well, it's this healthy thing I'm doing. But there are many periods in my life where I've hit that end range where it's like, oh God, this does not, I'm not okay anymore.
Yeah.
So what was that like? What was the experience like in your body that you were able to identify, like, I can't keep doing this, or I recognize that this isn't healthy anymore?
Yeah, well, I wish I saw the early signs, and that's why like I can see kind of like so many things that people usually like kind of like they don't see, because I wrote all of those. Like kind
Okay.
of like there was like when you have digestive issues, that should be already a warning sign on its own. When you start having kind of sleeping problems. I was using Aura Ring, and I stopped that because it was like annoying because it wasn't getting better.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like
You're
my
like,
high achiever.
I realize I'm not sleeping. Yeah.
So it was kind of like that. It is like, it's almost kind of like that. I was trying to achieve these things, but it's like relaxation and recovery aren't things that you can achieve. And that kind of like high achiever type, like I was able to achieve kind of training like goals, but when it came to achieving better sleep and actually those like healthy things, like I wasn't progressing in them, and then I was like just annoyed rather than actually like seeing that, hey, maybe the problem is actually me, maybe I there are some things I actually need to learn. So yeah, so I guess kind of the quote that came pretty popular when CrossFit came kind of like popular is stronger than my excuses. And nowadays I kind of see that as stronger than my feelings. So it's like I am so strong that I can overwrite everything that my body is trying to tell me, until one day you just cannot do that anymore. So yeah, so kind of like there were a lot of signs that I have been looking back to, which I should have listened to, but I didn't. So that's why I kind of talk about the things that I do, because I wish that it didn't have to kind of go that far, that your body starts like actually like alarming with chronic pain at the point that you're like, hey, like now I need to stop. And it isn't about the body, it's like it's not about the back. And of course, like there are issues, like there have been multiple issues that I've been specifically working on, but that kind of like exploded at the point where my system was kind of like, it was just kind of just trying to stop me somehow. So yeah.
Yeah, it put on the brakes. I love that, what you just said, stronger than my feelings. That's so beautiful. Yep. And it's, you know, sad in a way, but it's also like the fact that you can recognize that and be able to like now have this lens looking back and go, okay, how can I impart this wisdom on, you know, for other people, and hopefully save them. And, you know, the thing with this stuff is I feel like, I don't know, for me, like there have been points where the exercise has, you know, been too much and my body was kind of exhausted, but then like came back down and things leveled up, and maybe things in my life also had their up and down sort of wave as well. And so like, you know, peaks and valleys. But when I really crashed after my son's accident, it was like I never experienced anything like that in my body ever. I had no idea. So when people talk about burnout or, you know, really, really suffering in that way, I finally got it. I was like, wow, like my body just said no, like you can't even exercise. And did you have a similar experience to that where it was like really, you know what I'm saying? Like there have been other times in my life where it's been close to that, but never that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I kind of like, that's the other side of the thing is kind of like the mental, because like I started having like anxieties, like I was basically walking around this island, like trying to solve a problem, with a kind of like with a sort of like a message in my head that was just going around in circles. Like I was trying to sort of like fix a problem that I didn't know where it started or where it ended or what I was trying to actually fix, but I was trying to fix it in my mind, because that's kind of like the anxiety was like, basically it was because my physiology was like so kind of far in that sympathetic state, and then I like thought that I can figure it out through thinking, and like, yeah, it didn't lead anywhere. So
Right.
like, even though at that time I did do like the base kind of work, but I still didn't truly connect that the body based work was supposed to be the tool that kind of like helps me gain enough balance so that I can rationally like approach the things and start processing, so then I'm even like understanding what I'm trying to fix. But instead, like because we all think that we are rational, we think that it's like I have all, like I have it all together, and now I'm just trying very hard to fix this problem. And the more I kind of like allowed that cycle to go around, the further in stress I was kind of like just driving myself. So that was kind of basically like, well, this is an island, and I've been like laughing at this story myself, because like that has been like my way of like dealing with kind of like issues. It's like, hey, it's like I'll just kind of disappear for a little bit of time, and then I'll fix this problem. And then I'll come back when like I have solved that. And so it's like I sort of kind of like isolated myself here, because I was like, it was, everything was overwhelming, and I was trying to do the same, like fixing the problem, and then come back to where I was, and it didn't work anymore. So it's like that's kind of like that, like all of the ways that I have used before to solve any problems didn't work anymore. It's like I couldn't solve them in my mind. So some other things needed to happen.
I think this is so important for people to hear, because oftentimes when you go seek help, even from very well-intentioned and really great therapists, it can be, pushing to talk about things, to solve the problem, when your body's not even in a state to be able to conceive of the problem, because we need to like downregulate the nervous system and calm, and here the talking about it is doing what you were just saying. It's like ramping up the body even more and creating more disconnection between what's really happening inside and what our brain is trying to solve as a puzzle. So what was your first step, if you don't mind sharing, to sort of reconnecting back and like understanding what you were feeling?
That's a that's a tricky one. I guess kind of like I love using, like, let's say that like some kind of emotions that we don't like ourselves, or we have been kind of processing in other ways. And one, I would say very commonly for women is actually being angry and expressing anger. And so it's like kind of I I expected that anger to go away, because there were some certain things that happened that I was actually angry and hurt about. But it's like I tried to kind of like just like make those disappear. Or then like kind of like using exercise, so going on a long run or going on a long cycling ride, to just kind of like, it just um like mutes that anger, but it is still there. And those sort of things, like when you come to a point where it's like nothing else is working, then you start actually needing to sort of like admit some things, and starting to, I guess, get real with yourself. Is like this kind of like hiding and circling around problems isn't working anymore. It's like now I actually need to start like actually admitting things to myself. That probably like helped, because like I make a lot of progress almost like through a year's time. And then I almost went back to my old ways. Like I was overworking, I was overtraining, I didn't listen to myself. We moved houses. And then I had like massive back pain. It's like I couldn't even walk. It's like I was kind of like laying on the floor, trying to sort of like breathe myself out from that. And my dog was kind of like just sniffing around. It was like, hey, mommy's okay. Mommy's okay. So it's like, I guess kind of like, if you want to like, one is that it's like, okay, it's like I thought I fixed this problem, but maybe I didn't, because I'm here lying on the floor and not able to actually like move. And then kind of going back to that, like those same patterns I was kind of like going straight back into, because I hadn't actually worked on the real issues. Because like those are usually the real issues that I see behind many people, behind their chronic pains. Like it can be helpful to start the process by like you said, by kind of like dealing with the body first, to calm everything down, because you cannot talk your way out from that. but at some point you need to start actually like processing those things, or otherwise you may easily find yourself back in square one, or then you think that it's like, I made a bit of progress, but maybe it wasn't working. Yes, it was working, but maybe I'm not working at this point. So
that makes a lot of sense, so that you can begin with the body, but then you're ultimately going to have to come back to the real underlying issues that are the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the anger piece is so huge. I think it's such, I remember, I'm very open about this, but I recently got off my antidepressant medication that I had been on for, I don't even know, since I was 16. I'm 45. So really long time. And it took a long time. Like, this is 6 or 8 months of me trying to get off this medication. And every time I would like taper down just a little bit, I would get this sensation of like rage. And the message that I was telling myself is, there's something wrong with me and this is bad. But I'll never forget when my coach Emily was like, so that's normal. You're allowed to feel angry. Now, you don't go hit someone because you're angry, but it's so normal to feel angry. And recently I was in the backyard, I was upset about something. And I was like, I'm going to work out at home so that I can slam the med ball into the ground and scream as loud as I like. Into the ground. My husband comes out and he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah.
He probably just thought that is like, hey, yeah, keep on going, keep going.
This is because I can. I don't want to be at a gym doing it, you know. But anyway, I think like, I laugh about it, but it truly is something that I've always thought, like, if I'm angry or I show anger, even though it's not like directed towards somebody, that's different. It is like a bad thing. But we hold, I think, as women, as mothers, as just, there's so much responsibility, and we hold a lot of that in, you know. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people can probably resonate with the feeling of guilt of having anger. So now you've got anger and shame, and then it's going, you know. So how did you, like, when did you actually get to a place where you were like, okay, I'm feeling better in my body, I'm understanding these concepts? And like, was there any courses or things that you took that helped you to lean into the physiological side of things and start to really create this new lens for yourself and for your clients? I'm assuming you're passing this stuff on.
Yeah, well, that's actually a thing, because like, I am all for education. Like, I think learning can be such a powerful thing. Like, there needs to be a limit to that, because like what I think many people try and do is like intellectualize themselves through something that needs to be felt. So I actually studied all of the things is like later, like afterwards, when I actually understood kind of like what was going on. So like, I'm actually happy that I didn't go for, because I wasn't actually like, I didn't know what is the problem that was solving. So I kind of like, I maybe moved it a little bit more intuitively through it. And that is actually like, I think that benefited me, that I didn't try and kind of like look from books what is happening, but I actually kind of zoned in, and I was kind of like actually listening to myself, because like, maybe like, this is a guesswork, but I don't think that knowing so much of stuff would have actually helped me, because like, in the beginning I didn't have capacity to kind of like process everything I have processed within the kind of like past 3 years. And if I would have known that all, I think it would have actually just created more overwhelmed than actually being helpful. I'm not sure if you're following this, but in some ways, like kind of like, sometimes I see people that they try and read everything about nervous system dysregulation, but they struggle at the point that they need to actually like feel things, and you cannot like think your way out from a problem that is actually the disconnect between your kind of mind and your body. So there wasn't any actual like courses. Like I have sort of like been linking the things that I felt at each point, and which did start to happen like pretty naturally afterwards with education.
So you sort of leaned into just feeling what you were feeling. And then once you were feeling better, you were able to then educate yourself on it. Am I saying that right? Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah. But and I'm not saying that that wouldn't be helpful, like that would be the only way for everyone,
Sure.
but that was helpful for me because I need to hear myself. I need to hear my own thoughts when I do like this is horrible because I do know that I myself do kind of like contribute to the overwhelm that is like going on, for example, in Instagram. But like I can like absorb maybe a few posts and then I need to shut my phone because I'm going into that kind of like overwhelmed like state through just the information overload. So I think that one part is that like educate, try and kind of like understand what you're working with, but then make sure that you leave enough space for your own thoughts to actually hear yourself, and not try and kind of like lean on just kind of information to solve the problem.
Yes, that makes so much sense. So much sense. And I
Yeah.
think that is a part in today's, you know, clickbait, all of this. There's just so much information, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, the news, the open up the iPhone, and then there's like news stuff that like, where did that come from? You know, so it's just like this constant. And even my email, I mean, I don't know about you, but I get so many more just kind of random emails. I don't even know how these people got my email address.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly like deleting and then blocking and just trying
Yeah.
to control this flow of information. So I wonder if, like, that's a really good point for coaches too, because it's really easy to get sucked down the rabbit hole. I mean, I teach a 12-week mentorship course of like, take this course, take this course, take this course. And I do sometimes see that where I'll have certain people that will come in that have never even been exposed to the fact that they have a diaphragm and breathing, right? And they're just like, they just thrive in the course because they have less information. And then I have the people that come in and they've taken 6, 7, 8 courses that have something to do with maybe something even in my course. And it's like they're struggling because, to your point, the information then has to be carried over into just like, what do you think about it? Like, what's your viewpoint of this? What is, what's useful for you that you can pass on to your people? Not that you have to know every nuance of the theory and understand all the little intricacies, because that almost is like so overwhelming that you end up in a situation where you can't even, you're just trying to think yourself out of it. So if you had advice for someone who was, let's talk, I'm going to say trainer, okay, just movement professional, when they are absorbing information, how they can tap into how to make it usable for themselves or for others in a way that's like more thoughtful. Like, how did you then take a course and then be able to step back? Like, what's your process in that when you do learn something now? Did that make sense?
Well, I think, yeah, that made a lot of sense. Like what I kind of like utilize is that I start feeling overwhelmed by information, then I take a pause and then I just use that information in my practice. And then someday, like it feels normal. It's like this knowledge is now in my work and it's like wouldn't do any other way. And then I go and dive into more. So I think kind of like it needs to be like pace up that is like there's like I want to know everything there is possibly to be know, like that you can know about a human. And I was like saying to my colleague that it's like one day I will kind of try myself absolutely mental with like trying to sort of like learn everything, but it's like that's not how you learn, because the learning happens between those kind of bits of learning, while like when you're like digging into new information, the learning part is actually like using that into your, was it that your professional practice or in your everyday life, if you're learning as kind of like everyday person who is like wanting to learn things that are helpful for you and your health. But it's like, I think like many people stumble on like not actually, like they have a whole lot of tools and a lot of information, but they haven't ever brought those into practice. But that's where the magic happens, is like you need to actually, like, you have that bit of information like how the diaphragm and the pelvic floor works, but it's like that information alone isn't going to help anybody. Like you actually need to figure out how you're going to help a person with that information. And I think like we try and like kind of like learn our way into being better when like the doing itself is what makes us better. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful and such a good message to hear. And I think there's a fear of getting it wrong, maybe sometimes, that drives that wanting to know more. And one of the like tenets in my bio, but on my website and stuff, is creativity. And I think in a lot of ways, this mass amount of information that we're seeing, this influx, is limiting our creative potential. And when we're in that creative zone, that is the connection deep inside of us. So I think about like my son, he's such a creative person. Like he's one of those kids. He's always like make believe and, putting these Lego movies together and, all that kind of stuff. And when he's in the zone, you can see it. And I remember being a kid, like in that make believe world and like in that zone, and it feels so good in your body. But when we are consuming or comparing, or competing, any of those things are all C's, we can't be creative. It's impossible to do those two things simultaneously. And what you're kind of essentially saying is like, you have to be able to take the information and then go have your creative time with it, like that connection. That totally resonates with me. And there are things that I put out, on Instagram that are like, probably most people would be like, this is so random. I'm like sitting on a ball and like rolling my pelvis around. But in time, I could get judged for that and say that's not right or that doesn't make sense. But like, that's me experience a creative moment that is going there, and then sharing that with people in the hopes that other people will also feel empowered to like be able to do that themselves. So when you are like digging into because you were very creative, like I love reading your posts, not because it's like consuming information necessarily, but because I feel like there's a connection there that you're trying to get to with people, where you're giving an emotional, I don't know how to even explain it. How would you even explain? Because when you post, it's long form. And so you hope people are reading your captions.
Yep. It's not the video.
Yeah.
It's the caption.
It's usually in the captions. The videos are nice. I love your backdrop and you're a great mover, but the captions are what I think encapsulates the most. How do you get that out of yourself? Like, what's your process of sharing all that?
That's not a problem at all. Like I have so many thoughts in my mind that it's like I just need to get those out. But it's like that's actually my learning process, because like I have actually started utilizing, like I'm sorry, I share kind of like, and I want other people to learn about that. But I only think that if I can write down something that sort of like makes it simple enough so that anybody could understand, that's the proof for me that I have understood it well enough. Like if I don't understand it well enough, then I cannot write it in a way that anybody can understand. And then I start using like fancy words and like all of the kind of like professional kind of like language, which isn't that helpful usually. So I'm actually like using that also for myself, because that's my learning process. It's like getting my thoughts out on something. It's almost like my Instagram is a little bit like my diary. Like if I was kind of like writing something, that would be basically it. But it's like that's my way of learning. I think kind of like everybody like needs to find their own way of like learning. But it's like I think like what you said is like if people complicate things for themselves for the fear of doing something wrong, and that kind of like that cuts the kind of like creative, because like you're not struggling to create your creative kind of movements, you do that very well. And I don't struggle while writing my captions, because like I'm not thinking about like what other people think of that. Like in some ways I don't care if somebody sees there being a mistake, because like what I have learned also is that like doing mistakes is not just a risk, it is reality. So if you are not, if you're fearful of making mistakes, then you're not going to do anything. So like get kind of busy doing those mistakes. It's like the reality is that nobody else will remember those.
Yeah, they'll be
You
gone
will. And it's
tomorrow.
like yeah. You're kind of like, oh, a year ago I said that, but it's like I can remember that, and now I have learned something new, and let's kind of like continue from there. Like we are so fearful of our own mistakes, but we like I'm not kind of like looking at my Instagram and spotting everybody's mistakes. Like we look ourselves in that way, not others. Like we're more accepting usually of others' mistakes than we are of our own. So like I think kind of was it like you training or you as a professional doing your social media is like you just need to get busy making mistakes, and then you are also building that resilience on kind of like being okay with your mistakes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, you coach, and do you do individual like programming with people? And I know you also have like your mobility, or I'll say your membership with lots of different classes and mobility drills and all kinds of stuff. Um, how do you, let's say I come to you and I want to train with you as an individual. What's kind of your process of thinking about how to structure somebody's movement plan, I guess, and thinking about all these things that we talked about from a nervous system regulation standpoint?
Well, like learning about them is like kind of like I think like the questions we pose in the beginning, those are the most helpful, because when you are working in an online setting, it's like you like everything you want to know you need to ask. So I want to know if somebody has kind of like had a burnout, they that they suffer for PTSD, do they suffer from anxiety, because those are things like I just at some point noticed that people didn't tell me, and then those kind of like really backfired later on, because they didn't know how to maybe link problems or traumas with their bodily problems, and then we're trying to heal a body which has some kind of like stuff underneath that needs to be sort of like sorted out at the same time. Because like I'm not a therapist. If somebody has a childhood trauma, I usually always like recommend that if they are kind of having chronic pain, that they should see a therapist alongside. So it's like kind of like I think like I'm trying to be the eyes and the ears of seeing maybe all of the things that do have an effect on person's body and their problems that they wish for me to solve, that they don't maybe know to tell me if I don't ask. So that is kind of like the first thing that needs to happen. And then we of course assess and like look at the body, but it's like kind of like knowing the person underneath that body is the first step. So
What's it like? Because
yeah.
something came in my head when you were saying this, because I thought one thing I just thought was it would have been so helpful to have a trainer like you at times in my life, right? The other thing that came into my head was, what about the people that are going, I don't want to, like, there's nothing wrong and I need to like train 6 days a week, and like something's wrong. How do you handle those people and get them, or do you just, I don't know, how do you handle that? Or do you get those?
Yeah, well, like if they have followed my Instagram, then they probably won't contact me. Like, well, that is like the reality. But then of course, like I actually like just thinking of that, like from thinking of the early years working as a PT. So massive red flags, but as a 21-year-old, I had no absolute capacity to kind of like understand or properly help in those. So in many ways, like I see kind of like, because I started as a massage therapist, and then
Oh,
I kind of like I decided that I don't want to be sort of like enabling problems. I want to help people in fixing those problems themselves, and then became a PT, and then kind of like working on the mobility and pain side of things. And I still see that like there is that link to the psychology, because we might be enabling kind of
yeah.
things through like training, which should be kind of worked in the therapy side of things, or some sort of like mindset form or whatever that is. Because like what you're explaining there is that kind of like there is a person with chronic pain and wants to train hard like 6 days a week, and you can see the red flags is like, if I am that, then I think that I'm enabling a problem. I'm not actually helping. So yeah, I think kind of like then become a part of all trainers education, really. I don't understand why isn't it,
Oh,
because
yeah.
like how can we pretend that we are actually supporting people's health if we cannot see even those like clearest of red flags?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it should be, it should be at the forefront of things, honestly, this understanding of physiology and the mental health side of things. And if you think about it I know for years I did this weight loss challenge. So I basically volunteer and I'd take a group of people at the gym that I worked at, and it would be like 10 or 15 people, and they'd be on a team. And the goal was to sort of get them to lose as much weight with support, community. We even had like mental health, and it was at the medical university, so we had lots of different players. So really wonderful program, but still, it didn't. We didn't talk about calming your nervous system. We didn't. I mean, none of that. And you can imagine that if you're obese, a lot of that is probably linked to some mental
Yes.
health issues that need to be addressed, just like if you are an alcoholic or if you are, a sex addict and you're compulsively doing something, right? Or just over
Yeah.
exercise, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's all the same
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
I look back and like you, my 20 something self, or going through that process, man, there were so many opportunities that I could have given a different perspective that would have made it easier for all of those people to calm at the end of the night instead of sit in front of the TV with a bag of chips, and like learn how to
Yeah.
create more of a holistic perspective. And it's, I mean, again, you make mistakes and you don't know what you don't know and all of those things, but you're right. It should be mandatory as part of, especially now as we're learning more and more about it, as part of becoming a trainer, or really just any movement professional, even a massage therapist,
Yes.
right? Like you still have to know that. So now that you do kind of know that, when you go into like I went and stalked your portal or your Teachable website, kind of looked, it was really cool. So I know that you use like a lot of the FRC principles, and I feel like PRI and maybe some of those other systems, you do a great job of integrating it in your own unique way. But I wanted to say that I really liked how you laid out your membership, where you kind of have an assessment process so that it seems like even an average person could come in and say, okay, what is going on with my body? Like, how do I even figure that out? So how do you go about, I guess, structuring that membership so that anybody could come into it? Because sometimes with these systems, it can be hard to know what someone needs, especially if it's like generalized, you know what I mean? Because you can only do so much with a monthly membership.
Yeah, like the on-demand membership, which isn't kind of like, yeah, like, so I have you do basically the same assessments yourself as I would do as a coach, and then I have a video explaining what I as a coach look for from those kind of different assessments, and how to then kind of decide what your starting point is, as I would as a coach choosing that for somebody else. And then I have kind of like selection of tools that you can, based on like what you assessed, to then kind of like start with, and then you reassess and maybe progress. So that is kind of because I wanted to like something I see that like still like I want to provide that opportunity for people who cannot do one-on-one coaching. But that's sort of like I cannot do that. Like
Can't what?
like kind of like like kind of like I saw that that's kind of like that's how much I can help in a on-demand setting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think I'm asking because I know there's a lot of coaches who would like to have their own business or do something where they scale their business. And I think it's really important because not everybody can afford to pay $500 a month for individual coaching, or, it's just not reality. And I was talking to my friend Alina, who is in kind of the PRI world and works as a practitioner, really using their system. And she's wanting to have her own kind of online on demand thing and struggling a little bit because the concepts can be so, especially when you get into the cranial stuff, can be so specific and all of that. But she's like, but there are some underlying things that kind of everybody needs, and not everybody, like, I would love to myself go get some dental work because I know there's stuff going on, but there's nobody near me. So I'd have to travel and I don't have time for that. And you know what I mean? And so if
Yeah.
there was something online that would be helpful, I encouraged her. I was like, I think you should still put it out there. It doesn't have to be super specific and you can still get benefit from it. So I was asking you because I thought the way that you laid it out, and you even went into some complexities of our asymmetry, and sort of here are exercises that you can do, and people might not know what their compensations are, but how many times are we still going after the same things with most people? Like 99% of the time, it is a lot of the same things. And to pretend that it's not is almost doing a disservice because it's helping less people that could really benefit from the information. So I think you did a really good job of honestly, it's not like I watched anything, but just seeing, you can go, if you go on her Instagram and click the link in the bio, there's like your membership in it. You can like visually scroll and like see what the classes are. And so I could kind of put it together in my mindset of what was going on. Do you struggle with that, like reconciling with understanding these concepts on a much deeper level, but being able to kind of disseminate them in a way that's broad?
Yeah, well, I think like the things that I have chosen in that membership is like because I have worked with a couple of customers who have started with one of my courses or one of my or the membership, and they have kind of like kickstarted that journey already. So we were kind of like already a step ahead when we started together. So like I'm just kind of like trying to use the tools that are somewhat applicable for everybody. Stuff probably not gets a little bit too far, but it's like just addressing the breathing and pelvic asymmetry. Like that's already a huge step for a lot of people, and a lot of people like do actually get better by just kind of like utilizing those few things, and then maybe for me some that can trigger kind of like the will to learn more through maybe doing a little bit of like one-on-one coaching, but it can be so helpful on its own already. So I just kind of, because I think many coaches go into that like overthinking like path. So like thinking that is like what can everybody do and benefit from? That's what we can like serve in an on-demand setting. Nothing like too complex, because like I think like when it comes to PRI especially is like I've been working with a couple of people who have done PRI based course of some sort, and they are very kind of like particular with the technical, like the mechanical execution of those. But like that's not PRI. Like PRI is not about like training muscles or about kind of like being good at like kind of like technical execution of a movement. Those are supposed to be helping you connect with your body and feel stuff, and that's usually hard actually to get to focus on in an on-demand setting, because that's so easy to maybe guide people through in one-on-one setting, is not, because like when you don't give information what a person should kind of like feel then they feel what they feel and not what they think they should feel, and try and achieve that. So that is actually like the biggest kind of challenge that I think myself that is there, like in bringing PRI into on-demand setting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just the ability to slow down and tune in and create that sensory awareness. It is really, really hard. And sometimes it can take months for people to be able to sense
Or
it.
a year.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
a year.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, no, I know.
Like I think kind of like that is like people who have a strong training background, they do tend to approach those kind of PRI exercises that is like, okay, now I feel the adductor, and then I'm like muscling my way through that. And it's like, and then
Yeah.
your body's not relaxing and you're like, I'm grumpy. So like that was a little bit kind of like my beginning. So I see that as a challenge for many with a training background, and it can be hard to start sort of like actually like finding those different tones without any guidance.
Yeah. And when I think about some of the people that I hear saying like, these breathing drills don't work, this is like nonsensical to do these things. But the reality is, I wonder if some of them have just never gotten to that place where they felt that connection, where that deep sort of like, I can settle in here. I can settle into the left side of my body. And that just feels so good. And it makes me think about the passive experience. One of the things that I've been drawn more and more to is finding ways that give a non-manual solution that is basically passive. So I think about when I took courses, I'm a trainer, so I don't put my hands on anybody, but they would do things to constrain the rib cage, hold the ribs in, compress the pump handle to force the position and the space to open up. And now I find a lot of benefit in giving somebody something that does passively compress them as if somebody had their hands on them, so that they don't have to create this muscular strategy to try to get it done, because some people can't. And actually I'm thinking about my friend Joy, who just posted a exercise I showed her last weekend. We were at a course together, and I said, just lay down on your left side and kind of roll over this yoga block and just let your head kind of melt to the left and like feel what that feels like. And she was like, I wanted to stay there all day. And I was like, yeah, yeah, you got it. Like, that's what it feels like, And
Yeah.
I think that's a very hard thing to convey online. And
Yeah.
so it's like trying to find ways to give that to somebody is really hard. And it's also
Yeah.
makes me think that even when somebody does leave like the perfect PRI session where I got all the range of motion back, can they recreate that for themselves when they're not with that person? And that's where it becomes such a, is this helping me or not? So if we can provide more solutions, it might, or more understanding, basically, which is what leadership can do if you set it up well.
Yeah. And then we like, because there are so many layers, and this is like kind of like when you feel that relaxation one time, do you then go into your second time like independent of the result that you're looking for because you felt that last time, and then you're just like going into the same exercise, but because you're trying to achieve a certain outcome from that, then you don't feel the same. and your body is not relaxing anymore, because like I played those mind games so many times, and it's actually hard. It's like even just finding the way to not look for a certain outcome, because like for example that like side laying exercise, and then you feel for the first time, oh, this feels amazing. Are you going to go into that second time around and looking for that same relaxation, or are you allowing your body to be and do and feel whatever way it does the second time around?
Yeah.
So
That's
there's
a
so
whole
much
other,
that goes.
yeah. And just kind of being okay with it. Yeah. That kind of comes back to the mind body too. And just trusting that your body's doing or getting what it needs and is okay. Kind of that trust relationship of not pushing it or forcing it. That's so interesting. I see so many people that overthink this stuff, and I'm guilty of overthinking it too. And it's hard to know how to get people to let go. And I guess
Yeah,
that's what this
yeah.
whole conversation has been about.
Like we are overthinking this whole thing. No,
Yeah.
but it's like overthinking is like it is like I would actually think that for many, like, because I think like in Instagram there is a mess between kind of like what messages are maybe more directed towards other coaches and what messages are directed towards people who are looking for tools to kind of like work on themselves, and those are different. It's like kind of like that, this overthinking, this is what we do because we're trying to problem solve for other people, so we try and find all of the ways to help and solve in kind of like different ways, but shouldn't kind of like try and overthink these things, and try and kind of like almost like gain that same sort of like a coach's mind toward movement, because that can be also very unhelpful, because then you are trying to overthink these exercises when you're doing them, when it should be a way for you to reconnect with your body and not kind of like think of like how Katie did it in that video. And it's like you're not trying to replicate what Katie did in the video, you're trying to kind of actually zone in and feel what you feel in that very same movement, which can be a totally different thing than what you felt when you made that sometimes.
Yeah, that's very true. And I guess in some ways the coaching is teaching people that it's okay to do that. Like you're
Yeah.
going to have a different experience than me, and our viewpoint of movement is going to be very different just depending on, background and history. Yeah. So can you tell us, I just want to ask you one more question about just a little bit about, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to bring this up, but kind of just talked about Instagram, but your view on some of the clickbait posts. So this exercise, at the point of view, is a great one, like POV, people write, and then it says, do this one move and your back pain will disappear. Or do this one thing and your SI joint won't hurt. And how you navigate giving that information, some information away that might help somebody without making it this experience of this thing's going to fix you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit like black and white person. Like I allow myself to kind of like think that this isn't helpful at all, and now I'll just kind of like talk about things that everybody should know, and it's not about an exercise. But that is actually like something that you said so well, is like that like one exercise can kickstart a journey towards something better, which is the kind of like the something that is maybe somewhere in the future, but you felt something that you have never felt before, and then you want more of that. And I think that has value, because like the first time I did a PRI exercise, I had no kind of expectations at all, which was a good thing. And then I was like, oh, this feels so amazing. Like my whole lower back melted, and there was this like nice warmth. And I had planned to actually do a training session like after that, and then I just felt like happiness because like that was like allowing my nervous system to actually like calm down, probably for the first time in a long time. And I felt kind of like happy and calm in a way that I never had felt before, because I didn't expect anything. So if that sort of an experience can be delivered through one exercise, that is in a way that this won't be solving the whole problem, like you said, that this like do this one exercise and it will kind of like solve your back pain. It won't. Like it can be helpful if it's that this can be helpful, and then you might want to kind of like learn more about that. So I think like it's a either or. So I'm trying to get into your mind in that kind of like finding the middle ground, and I'm not allowing myself to kind of like see only two sides of that. So it can be helpful.
Yeah. And I feel like as long as somebody, the hope is that then they'll go read the caption where you say, this isn't going to fix everything, but it's a start and you can learn more, try, go look at my website, follow me on YouTube. I know you started a YouTube channel with some like longer form videos. So people can like get to the YouTube and like actually hear 10 minutes of what you're trying to explain versus 10 seconds. But I think what the problem is like the post where that people aren't even trying to explain what's happening here. It's just an exercise with no caption and no information. And then, 1 million people view it, and all of a sudden you've got all these followers, but they don't really care about learning anything from you concrete. And so it sort of dulls the whole experience for everyone. And I think that's where it kind of can be hard in the social media world. But, I just wanted to hear kind of your conflict with that, because I do think it's like a problem. And how do we?
Well, then, like then with that, we kind of need to look at the whole influencer side of things, which is another our podcast. Let's not go too far in that. So it's like, if I was a everyday person just looking for tools and tips for myself, I would be kind of curious of like, what is the goal of the post? Is it to sort of like spread knowledge, or is it to kind of benefit by some ambassador deal that is mentioned? So I just think that like the kind of like marketing, like health, that is kind of like has built in Instagram, that is massively like interfering or mixing up like with the educational side of things. So I think like it just requires people to be aware. And
Yeah. Well, I hope more voices like yours get out more mainstream or become the mainstream. They never will, because it will always be, more flooded with, influencers who just promote this, like, go hard and do this one thing and it'll fix it. I mean, that's just the nature of it. But I hope more people can get to a page like yours where yes, there are some posts that grab your attention because you're like, I have SI joint pain and this felt really good. But there's a story behind it and an explanation of why that might be, so that you can learn that that's not the end all be all, but we can move on. And that you offer, this is really important. I want to put this out here for all the coaches and movement professionals listening, that you then offer both a free and affordable offering for these people that maybe can't invest. That's where it's at. That's going to create the change, because then there's something there. So if you are a coach and you're on Instagram, just put some YouTube videos up. Just a few with some good information. It's so helpful to get the message out about this, healthy movement, is, I guess, a good way to put it. I don't know. What would you describe it as? Like, can you even like have a elevator pitch for what you're trying to do?
Yeah, well, what I would kind of like always is this respectful towards my physiology. like there is usually a clear yes or a no. Like if I'm trying to sort of like act against myself, that's not health. And we all do that sometimes. That's kind of like we're only human. But like the more awareness we can sort of like build towards our kind of like physiology or our state at the moment, then we can make better decisions of like what is actually going to be supporting and respectful toward that. So was it kind of like, am I trying to do some kind of flexibility drills that are not actually like leading towards more health? Am I just trying to achieve some movement? Or yeah, like I don't know how to explain that better, but that can be sort of like applied to many things, but it requires self-awareness and understanding of kind of like your physiology, and that's the challenge.
That's great. Yeah. So is this improving my physiology, or is it bringing me away from that? I love that. That's a great way to end. That's perfect. So tell everybody where they can find you and anything you may have going on right now.
Yeah, that's a hard one. So at the moment, I am actually working for a mind body course that will be, because like you just said, that is like, let's not just talk about the problem, let's provide tools for that. And there are some things that don't go to, like, I'm not a therapist and I'm not trying to be, but it's like some things don't go so far into the field of like psychology. It's like we don't need to have a problem before we can start working on our mind. So I'm working on a self-paced course that kind of like covers how can you sort of like start seeing the link between your mind and your body, and start like learning how to read your body better, and then making better choices based upon that. So that is what I'm working on. So at the moment, I will be keeping myself busy with that and sharing some bits of information through my Instagram.
That's awesome. I think you're going to just have so many people excited about that. And it's so needed in this space. That's really great. I really appreciate the time. And it was just great to actually get to be on here and meet you.